Today is Sunday, April 6th, 2025, and this is episode 302. Not the error message, by the way, of the Defensive Security Podcast. My name is Jerry Bell, and joining me today, as always, is Mr. Andrew Callett.
Good afternoon, sir. How are you?
I'm so good it hurts. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. You're on a different camera. Apparently, your main camera, I guess, just couldn't handle it anymore and just committed suicide.
It couldn't handle the awesome.
It was just too much for it to take, and it went to a farm upstate where cameras go, is what I'm told.
That's right. It crossed the Rainbow Bridge.
Many trigger warnings on the start of this episode. Anyway, hello. Good to see you. Thanks for having me.
Likewise. Thanks for being here. And thank you to our listeners for being here. And also a special thank you to our Patreon donors. Thank you very much. And by the way, we are very open and very appreciative to anyone who would like to support our mission here with trying to advocate for better security hygiene. If you want to do that, you can visit our Patreon site. It's patreon.com/defensivesec. It's DEFENSIVESEC. Not the other thing. That's a whole other
completely different show. Completely different
show.
But if this doesn't work out, we may have to start it.
That's right. The money's running out. I've been out of work for almost a year now. Yeah, crazy. Anyway, also, speaking of that, the thoughts and opinions we express on the show are ours and not those of our employers, even employers who might be prospective. And they could be your opinions if you paid the right price.
The right price.
Right.
So what we're saying is somebody hire Jerry. That's what we're saying. Please.
Yeah. I'm not really looking for a job. I'm really looking for someone to just pay.
So really you want like a true old school patron where you're just, some billionaire just funds your lifestyle.
Exactly.
Because he or she likes you. All right. I mean, hey, it's good work if you can get it.
I'm not above that. Anyway, enough of that. Getting into our stories, we have an update on the Oracle saga.
Nothing happened. There's nothing happened. There's no tanks here. We're fine.
This is not the breach you're looking for. So the title here is Oracle privately confirms cloud security breach to customers. Actually, I had that wrong. Oracle privately confirms cloud breach to customers. And this is from bleepingcomputer.com. So just to catch everybody up who may not have heard the last episode, a threat actor online has claimed that they hacked Oracle Cloud, basically been stonewalled, allegedly, by Oracle, who has up till now been publicly denying that they were hacked. The threat actor here has provided samples. They've provided some fairly substantial evidence that they compromised an infrastructure server that's part of Oracle Cloud's single sign-on infrastructure, which, by the way, was running a version of their identity and application management software that had a critical vulnerability from about 5 years ago. So not really awesome. That vulnerability, by the way, allowed a remote unauthenticated access, and allegedly the actor here uploaded a web shell and was able to download the data that the system contained. And so there's been a bit of back and forth with Oracle continuing to deny, the threat actor providing samples of the data to various different reporters. Some of those reporters have gone to the end customer of Oracle Cloud, and those customers have in turn confirmed that the information is legitimate. Basically, most of the world acknowledges that yes, this breach appears to be real. And now we have a new update that says that Oracle is in fact notifying, apparently privately, customers that were impacted. As far as I'm aware, there's not been a public admission that this has actually happened. The most recent statement I've seen is that they are saying that Oracle Cloud was not breached.
No.
The data was not belonging to customers, and apparently, oh, go ahead. You had something to add?
No. I was going to say, yeah, no. I mean, Oracle Cloud is fine. No. What was actually breached was Oracle Cloud Classic, completely
Yes.
separate.
I mean, I don't even know how you could get those things confused. They're so different. Like the average person really wouldn't in no way conflate those two things.
No, it's kind of like when Coke went to New Coke and then
Yes,
went
very
back to
much.
Coca-Cola Classic. I mean, so I don't understand what all the hoopla is. Clearly, Oracle Cloud was not hacked. Whatever this is, this little thing in Oracle Cloud Classic, completely look, it's just 6 million records in an old. Why? Look, they stand by their statement. Oracle Cloud was not hacked.
Yes, and it was old data. It was old data, but it was also from 2025. So look, it's obviously some sort of magic is happening here. I think this is beyond my ability to comprehend what has happened. It was not Oracle Cloud. It was Oracle Cloud Classic. It was only old data that was impacted, but the old data is as recent as 2025. I guess that's kind of where we're at.
Perhaps this is like the multi-cloud equivalent of the multiverse in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, where our version of Oracle Cloud wasn't hacked, but an Oracle Cloud on another version of our reality was actually hacked.
It bled in, and it somehow it bled into our reality temporarily.
Right. Correct.
And it was breached, and apparently they're trying to get it back to its own.
I mean, it seems as valid an explanation as what their press release is putting out.
Yeah. Anyhow, there's a lot of lessons on how not to respond to a breach publicly in this situation. I really think this will be a case study for quite some time. And my guess is they will attract the attention of various regulators who may have questions about their response. I mean, it's good. Look, it's good that they're notifying customers. I think it's not so good that they had a piece of infrastructure with a 5-year-old critical vulnerability sitting out exposed to the internet, as a cloud provider. And it's kind of almost worse that they've just been deny. So we talked about, last time, the potential impact to reputation and trust. And look, I was the CISO for a cloud provider, and trust is everything. If you lose the trust of your customers, it's really, really hard to get back. It's such a commodity service now. I don't know how you recover from that. Look, I'm not an security guy. I'm not an economist. Hell, who knows? Maybe they end up out selling more cloud because of this. I don't really know. The world is kind of upside down right now. But this is interesting times.
In other news, I don't think Oracle's going to hire you.
That's fine. If I don't work for another large company like that, I won't be sad.
And side story, a kind of footnote on this article. Apparently, they also had a breach. They also had a breach in their Oracle Health Services unit. So
yes,
that's fun.
From so there, by the way, there's some other articles written, and they've similarly been kind of a pain in that context too, because this appears like it was end customer. This one feels a lot like the Snowflake breach, where it was end customer users. They were stolen and were somehow brute forced, and that was the mechanism by which the data was stolen, allegedly. And now the threat actor is actually going after the end customers of this Oracle Health service. And so Oracle's finally acknowledged the breach. They've contacted their customers and told them that they're not going to notify any regulators or end customers. It's going to be up to Oracle Health's customers to notify their customers and any regulators. after they make their own assessment of what the data, whether the data is protected health information or not. On the one hand, I can kind of appreciate that position, but on the other hand, like in the bigger context, it leaves a really bad taste.
It does. It's a tough one. We've talked about this a couple times on the show of how much do you protect your customers from their own bad choices? And the last time we talked about this, I believe our conclusions were that these various providers, such as Oracle or Snowflake or others, probably are going to have to force more security on customer credentials just for their own reputation management. And I wouldn't be surprised if regulators for certain types of industry like health, finance, et cetera, start to push for it as well.
Absolutely. I think we're starting to see that. We actually have some stories later in the show that kind of exemplify that. I think that trend. So moving on with that, we go to another story which also comes from Bleeping Computer, and the title here, if I can get to it, is Recent GitHub Supply Chain Attack Traced to Leak Spot Bugs Token. So we talked to, I think it was last week or the week before, about the TJ Actions changed files of exploit, vulnerability, attack, however you want to describe it, that was weaponized to steal credentials out of repositories. There were something like 12,000 repositories that used this particular action. It successfully captured credentials out of a little over 200 repositories. There's some confusion in various media reports I've seen about whether or not any actual credentials were ultimately stolen. This article here seems to imply that there were, but that's not really the point of the article here. This walks through the chain of events that led to this particular attack, and it's quite convoluted. So, and I'll say at the start that the apparent target of the attack was Coinbase, which actually doesn't surprise me because a lot of these attacks, like the NPM attacks and whatnot, are very often, very, very frequently intended to go after crypto key or cryptocurrency wallets. And so this is another example of a threat actor trying to get at some cryptocurrency. But this one demonstrates a level of sophistication I think we haven't really seen in this kind of attack up to now. So the attack started a while ago. I think it was back in November when there's a static code analysis tool called Spotbugs was breached. And that was breached when one of their contributors apparently accidentally included a GitHub personal access token in a code commit. And that in turn led to the threat actor compromising another action, which resulted in stealing a personal access token from contributor to ReviewDog, which is another, I think it's another code review tool. And that contributor to ReviewDog was also a contributor on the TJ Actions changed files action, which allowed the threat actor to then do a couple of fairly novel things, in my estimation, on that TJ Actions change files. That's very clearly what they were ultimately trying to get to. What they did was they effectively hijacked that action by changing some tags on pull requests so that when victims who used this action ran that request, it was basically pulling code. It was executing code that was contributed by the bad actor. That code in turn was intended to pull out credentials from code and store them in a place that the actor could get to. Now, Coinbase, for their part, says that they weren't actually successful in running this on Coinbase's repository. So there were a number of people, like 218, I think is the number of repositories that had credentials pulled out. Again, don't know if they were actually exfiltrated, but Coinbase was not one of them. So,
well, the way I
interesting.
read this is slightly different. Is that
Okay.
Coinbase was impacted by this, but the way that the secrets are committed to log, it's only really a problem if that repository is public. So if your repository is private and you run this, the secret is printed out to workflow log, which is interesting to me that there wasn't another step with all this effort that went into this. And what seemingly to me is a very clever and smart effort, but I don't know a lot about this world. When they dumped the secret from memory, they just dumped it as a log entry in the GitHub workflow. So any public repo, that workflow logging is public. So those 218 repositories are the ones that had this happen, and they were public. But as I understand it, if you're private and this happened to you, that log entry went to a private repo that only your own people could see.
Okay. I misread that then. Okay, that makes sense. So they did actually, they were impacted by the malicious action, but because of how they had their security set up, the security on the repo set up, the credentials
It didn't
weren't
leak.
accessible.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, it
That
didn't
makes
leak
sense.
to the outside. I mean, it depends on whether or not you define a secret being dumped to your log file. A leak internally is a different conversation. Yes.
Interesting. So this is obviously a financially motivated attack, right? Now, that's not to
Well,
say we well, go ahead.
it's kind of like the modern day version of why do you rob banks?
True.
Because that's
True.
where the money is. Why do you go target, crypto companies? Because that's where the cryptocurrency is.
Well, I was trying to draw the distinction between, this was on its face a fairly sophisticated attack. Had a plan, and that plan had multiple steps. Now, I don't know exactly how coincidental, it's a little unclear to me how much of this plan was laid out ahead of time versus just kind of fortuitous events as they went along.
Yeah, did they know that Coinbase used TJ Actions changed files, or was that fortunate happenstance? I don't know.
Yeah, so I would assume that they somehow knew. I mean, that's kind of the implication that you get from this article and several others that I've read on the topic. So anyway, point is, not all threat actors are necessarily state sponsored, although we do know that some nation state actors are financially motivated. Like there's a lot of discussion about how North Korea is big into stealing cryptocurrency. So we know it happens, but I think the challenge is that a lot of threat actors, the more commodity threat actors, pay attention to the tactics that the more advanced ones are using and modeling their attacks after those. And so
Sure.
what was in the past, the realm of like Uber APT, you had to be some really high profile target. Now it's not so much the case anymore. Now, I think Coinbase is a pretty high profile target. Like if you can get into that, I'm sure there's lots of opportunity to steal significant money.
So they do have one recommendation here, and there was a lot more that we talked on previously, but in GitHub, you have the option of pinning dependencies using commit hashes instead of tags. So in this case, the tag didn't increment. It was still like the V1 tag. And in theory, you're supposed to increment when you change something, V1, V2, V3. But the hash would have changed because the code was different. So one thing GitHub recommends is, hey, look at your dependencies and look at these, commit their hashes and validate the hashes. I mean, you could still be tricked by not knowing, like if you update a hash to an updated malicious supply chain attack in your dependency code, that's not perfect. Like I still think we've got this gap here of we just import these dependencies and there's a huge amount of trust that we're putting in them without a whole lot of vetting right now in general. Like this feels like a big open attack surface that we're not doing a very good job at of mitigating the risk for software houses.
Yeah, definitely. And these actions are a special class of vulnerability that we're only really starting to explore. Ultimately, they're effectively third-party code that you're running on your code base at different trigger points. So
That's being live updated, potentially.
Right.
Yeah.
Correct.
So yeah, that's fun.
But before we started recording, we were talking about how this is becoming its own branch of IT. And I was kind of joking when I said it, but I actually think that it may ultimately be the case. We need something like a chief development officer who deeply understands how to structure code repositories, is responsible for the ecosystem of stuff that happens within it. I think it's gotten more complex than than we're really giving it credit for. And it's certainly more complex than just like treating it as another application, like
Mm-hmm.
email or something like that. It is becoming very high risk. It has sensitive information, and the supply. I think the supply chain type attack situation is growing to a point of, it's becoming so acute that I think we're going to have to take, as an industry, more drastic actions to get it under control. Now I know I'm not stupid. We're not going to.
I've never used it, but like one option I know about there is like Google offers a curated dependency library that you could pull from as one option. I've never experimented with it. I don't know if it's any good. I'm not endorsing it, but like that is one potential approach. Now, I have no idea how good their security would be around something like this. The other thing that occurs to me is how complicated this is.
Yes.
And how many nuances and little tiny changes that can have a big impact in security that are not well understood by, I think, most security folks, unless they're deep into the developer workflow and understand and have worked with this. And I'm not saying all security people need to go be coders or they suck, which is what some people see out there. I disagree with that statement. But not understanding the exact nuance of this application and how code moves through this application and permissions and the interactions and the ecosystem around it is common. And I think that makes it harder to secure it well if you don't fully understand it. And the reality is, if you had a chief development officer, is great, but if their goal is efficiency and speed and clean code, they may not look at it necessarily from the security side. So it's almost like a chief development security officer. Like you need that dual hat, I think, to get what I think you want out of that role.
So I think the other thing that is weighing on this is kind of the history of IT. In times gone by, we applied our effort in our protection on production stuff. Development and labs and whatnot tended to be internal resources. And the reality is the world has moved on. A lot of this stuff happens either directly connected to or adjacent to the internet. As we talked about, we're trusting third-party code that hasn't necessarily been vetted by us. And the systems that we store and manage and process our code in have gotten much more complex as well. But I still think that we're treating it like it's not production, like it's just the development environment. It's just the source code. And I think too many companies still have this notion of, well, it's not like credit card numbers. Like if I lose my source code, that's bad. It's proprietary code. They're not. They're I think thinking about the peril as my code gets disclosed. And while bad, a lot of companies would say, well, like I'm willing to allow my code to be disclosed in order to save $10 million of like security stuff, or having to hire more developers because we have to be less efficient or what have you. But the challenge is like that's not the only peril anymore. The big peril now is that your code is somehow weaponized to attack your customers, or one of your customers' customers, or something like that.
And unlike Quest for Holy Grail, that is not the peril you want to face.
Very true.
For you young people, go ask your parents.
It's definitely worth the question. All right. The next story we have comes from Security Week, and the title here is 39 million secrets leaked on GitHub in 2024. This is one of those examples, I think, of where we have talked in the past about how companies who provide some large scale service like this are, they have to walk a line. Like customers have to have to take responsibility for the things they're responsible for. And if customers do stupid things, like how much responsibility does the provider bear in those instances? But in certain extraordinary cases like Snowflake and others where it's an attractive nuisance in legal terms, people are going to hurt themselves, and like as a provider you should have known better. I think that's what this is an example of. GitHub is reporting here that throughout 2024 they've observed that they had about 39 million secrets that were committed into code by their customers, many of which are free, by the way, free customers. And in response, they're implementing some changes. So they've had some additional services that they've provided for enterprise customers, which they are now offering to their lower tier customers. I think one of them is that the secret protection feature is now available to basically to all customers. You don't have to have a enterprise account anymore. But I think we're going to see more of this because, again, at some point, somebody's going to, GitHub is going to lose credibility in the marketplace because they're this concentration of risk, even if it's not necessarily a result of GitHub themselves making bad choices. It's very similar in some ways to the Snowflake not forcing multi-factor authentication issue. Like if you have the ability to identify that your customers are contributing code into the repositories that you host for them, and they have secrets, like why are you letting that happen? Because we all know how it ends.
Yeah, it's a tough problem too. What's interesting to me about this is GitHub has a very robust secret detection capability, whether it's pre-commit, which is helpful because here's the problem. Once you commit a secret to GitHub, you can't really wipe it. It's there forever in some way, shape, or form. So at that point, it's too late. So you want to catch it before the pull request. So they have that capability. And as an enterprise customer, to get that functionality required you to buy this massive, expensive suite called GitHub Enterprise Security or GitHub Security, right? Advanced Security. Sorry, GitHub Advanced Security. What's really interesting about this offering is there's a bunch of things that it comes with, but if you just wanted the secret prevention or secret scanning, you couldn't get that alone. You couldn't get that a la carte. And so the cost of this advanced security was pretty high. I've looked at it in the past. It's not cheap. So the fact that they're splitting out the secret protection and code security as standalone products for enterprise customers is good. I think it'll make it a lot more affordable for a lot of enterprise customers. And they're also allowing you to do a free scan for all public, private, and enterprise repos for existing secrets, which also is huge. That's just not something you had to pay for that in the past. I'm very happy to see that. And to your point, since they are such a concentration of risk, this is something I've struggled with in many roles where I've worked with development teams is this is a very, very, very common problem. It's really easy to make this mistake of submitting a secret to code and then sending it up to GitHub, and then it's in essence leaked. I mean, even if it's a private repo, it's in that log forever. And who has access to that private repo? If that private repo ever accidentally goes public. So I'm happy to see GitHub making this easier. Here's the other thing I'll say. Secret detection is not foolproof. It's not 100%. Many of them, what GitHub does, as I understand it, take it with a grain of salt, they actually partner with many, many, many different organizations and get a very specific profile of exactly what that organization's secret looks like so they can detect it with a decent amount of accuracy. But a lot of these secret detection routines are looking for entropy, like a high entropic segment within the code piece or string. So you've got false positives, you've got false negatives, you've got to take care of that and be careful about. But either way, to me, this was something I struggled with in my discussions with GitHub in various companies I've worked with where they just didn't want to give, like, this was the piece a lot of companies needed, but it was too expensive because it came with a lot of other stuff they didn't need. And I think this goes a long way to solving a bunch of problems for a lot of companies. So I'm happy to see this.
Yeah, I will say it was one of the more common incidents I saw when I was working at a cloud provider from our customers, because as you just described, cloud providers are one of the companies that they partner with to kind of profile what your keys look like, and then they look for that type of pattern, and then they will feed that back to you. Hey, look, you're a cloud provider. We just saw a key that looks like it belongs to you. That happened a lot. It happened a lot. And I think, as we've talked about in the past, I think up until very recently, most of the time those keys that were stolen were used to do boring crap like pin up cryptocurrency miners, things like that. Now we're starting to see more advanced attacks like the issue we talked about recently with the TJ Actions changed files attack, where somebody accidentally committed their personal access token into code, and it's off to the races. That was the first domino in a long series of things that was attempting to compromise Coinbase. And I think we're going to start seeing more of that. I firmly believe, because look, this is the life I lived for some time, the ability for threat actors who are properly oriented to weaponize those stolen keys is growing, and what they can do with them are really horrible, because most companies don't properly scope the permissions they have on keys. And when you pair that with storing those keys in your public repositories, it's just a recipe for disaster. So
Yeah.
I'm very happy to see this. I hope GitHub customers take it to heart, use the tools that are available to them. But just for the listeners here, I can't stress enough how significant of a problem this is.
Yeah, and bad actors can find these leaked keys in public repos in minutes. They're very, very good at spotting these. So don't just hope that somebody isn't going to just stumble across it. They have scanners going all the time, constantly checking all public repos, and they pick them up fast.
We would observe a key being uploaded and then being used within minutes.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So at that point, that the whole chain is automated. Like it's not like somebody clicking through reading. Like it's the whole chain from detection to login to your cloud account is automated. There's not a human in the loop here. It's not a question of if it happens. And from that perspective, you really have to have the proactive controls in place to prevent this from happening in the first place. Otherwise, I mean, look, like the dentist said, you don't have to brush all your teeth, just the ones that you want to keep.
Wise words.
So anyhow, moving on to our next story. This one comes from the register.com, and this is a little different than normal, but I thought it was worth talking about. The title here is Raw Deal. Corporate spy admits role in espionage at HR software biz Rippling.
So, this crazy story.
This is crazy. This is really crazy. So there's two companies, and I want to make sure that I call it out because it's a little confusing. One company is named Rippling, and the other company is named Deal, DEEL. They're both HR software companies. So just that is the context. There's this guy named Keith O'Brien, who is in Dublin, Ireland, who worked in the payroll compliance group at Rippling. Apparently, he was on the market for a new job, and the CEO of this competitive company named Deal reached out to Keith and offered him a deal that apparently Keith couldn't refuse. So rather than a normal job, the CEO of Deal offered Keith to be, quote, James Bond and continue to work at Rippling, get paid by Deal as well, in return for spying on his employer Rippling, and then feeding back whatever information the CEO wanted out of Rippling. So the plot was concocted by allegedly the CEO of Deal, and this guy Keith O'Brien agreed to go along with the plan. And so apparently for some period of time, Deal would make requests of Keith O'Brien on what information they would like to see, internal information about Rippling, and that would get communicated back through Telegram because they wanted to have a secret communications channel. And I guess they had, kind of like the U.S. Department of Defense, they set their messages to expire so that they couldn't be held accountable.
Perfectly safe.
Perfectly safe, exactly. What could possibly go wrong? So apparently, at some point, Rippling became. Oh, go ahead.
How much is it worth to be a spy for industrial espionage at a competitive company?
So it's a king's salary of 5,000 euros per month.
That is a surprisingly low amount to me, honestly. I mean, we can chat about this more later, but I'm guessing Mr. O'Brien might have been a bit disgruntled for him to take such a relatively low amount for such a big risk.
Yeah, he's probably not in a high-paying job anyway, and so it could have been, it could have doubled his salary. I don't know.
Global payroll compliance manager is pretty healthy.
Hard to say.
Yeah, hard to say, but okay. Anyway, back to your narrative.
Hard to say. Ireland doesn't demand the highest wages. Anyway, Rippling became suspicious that somehow Deal, and it's by the way, it's not clear what caused them to become suspicious, but they became suspicious that they had a mole who was feeding information back to Deal. And so the team at Rippling had a clever idea. And in hindsight now, it's actually pretty brilliant. They sent an email, or sent a letter to Rippling, sent a letter to the leadership team at Deal and said that they found evidence that Deal is conducting espionage operations in this one particular Slack channel of Rippling's Slack account. And they listed the Slack channel, and they knew what was going to happen. What they had counted on, and what actually did happen, is that the Deal team went back to Keith O'Brien and said, Keith O'Brien, what is going on in the Slack channel that was referenced in this letter? Can you go and take a look? Well, the Slack channel was a canary. It was intended to out the mole, because the only person apparently in the Slack channel was like the chief revenue officer of Rippling. And so as Keith O'Brien is searching for this Slack channel, which was, I guess, set to private, and you could find it if you searched for it, he did that kind of simultaneous to getting a message back from Deal saying, no, don't, stop. We think it's actually a trap, and so just stop. So Keith replied back, no, I've already done it. And that got a reply of, oh shit, from the Deal CEO. and so then it kind of goes like, that's crazy up to this point. But now the crazy goes into overdrive. So obviously Rippling at this point knew that Keith O'Brien was the mole. And so he was visiting an office to pick up some paperwork, and was greeted in the lobby by a lawyer, a public lawyer. I think it was basically what we would in the U.S. call a prosecutor. And the prosecutor said that they wanted to search Keith O'Brien's devices, his phone and his laptop and whatnot. So Keith disagreed, and he ran into the bathroom and did a factory reset on his phone.
Who hasn't done that? Come on.
I mean, yeah, really. Who hasn't done that? So after he left the bathroom, he told the lawyer, I'm leaving, and the lawyer warned him that this was could have legal implications for him, and he said, well, I'll take that chance. So Keith then started getting guidance from Deal's legal team. Now, this is where it starts to get really wild because Deal's legal team, Deal's lawyers were actually apparently counseling Keith on what to do. And they told him to smash his phone and throw it in a pond. And in fact, what he did was
To be clear, Keith is spying on Deal for Rippling, but he's an employee of Deal. So therefore, Deal's in-house lawyers are trying to do some damage control to maybe minimize this to get out. So they're now trying to work with their own corporate spy that they have caught to minimize the evidence?
So no.
Okay.
No. So Rippling is the victim company.
Okay.
Deal is the offending company.
Got it. Okay.
So Rippling has caught Keith in the act and went to the police.
Got it.
The prosecutor visited him, and now Deal, the company who was soliciting Keith to perform
was paying him to be a spy.
Yep.
Yeah.
Their legal team is now advising Keith on how to act. And it is really hard to believe that lawyers who, I don't know that they were U.S. lawyers. I think Rippling is a U.S. company, and I think Deal it may not be a U.S. company. Anyway, lawyers are duty bound to act ethically. And so this is, I think, going to splash, assuming that the facts are as they're represented here, it's going to splash back on them. But anyway, the lawyers first told him to smash his phone and throw it in the pond. He apparently smashed it with an axe and put it down the drain. That doesn't seem like the best idea to me. But hey, that's what he did. And then they told him that if he continued to deal, told Keith that if he continued to cooperate, they would pay to relocate him to Dubai, which I guess doesn't have an extradition treaty, I suppose, and cover whatever legal fees he's accumulated. So their next request is for him to open up a police report accusing Rippling of violating the embargo on Russia. He was to claim that Rippling was facilitating illegal payments to Russia in contradiction to, the laws about restricting activity with Russia.
And was Rippling doing anything that would violate Russian sanctions?
No, they were not, in fact. But he did, in fact, open up a police report. And it's...
Why? What value does that bring?
So I think the intention there was to deflect away from the espionage case, so that if they were able to get Rippling closed down because they had allegedly been doing something with Russia, then they might not have to deal with the fallout of them soliciting corporate espionage.
So these lawyers watched a few too many episodes of Better Call Saul, is what I'm hearing.
They did something, man.
So then what happens?
So at some point along the way, as you read this, apparently as Keith was en route to a court proceeding, the person that he was in the car with convinced him to come clean. And so he struck a deal with the prosecutor that if he signed a sworn affidavit kind of admitting to what had happened, they would not press charge, or the company would not press charges on him. Now, I don't know. I'm not an expert in Irish law, so I don't know if there's still a possibility that the state could raise charges even if the company doesn't want to. Anyway, Keith admitted to everything that's been going on, and so now Rippling has lawsuits against Deal federal lawsuits against Deal in the U.S. And apparently, Keith, I guess, is just gonna walk away from this, which I find that absolutely amazing.
This whole thing is crazy.
Absolutely amazing.
So I don't know how you would really defend against this very easily, aside from, I would love to know what gave Rippling the suspicion that they had a mole. That's really where I would drill in for the context of this show. Of insider threat is a real thing, but in a situation like this, man, it's tough to know. Like, I guess if your competitor just happens to get a lot of smart information that is stupidly revealing to you that they know every move. For what little I understand about like military intelligence and espionage, like you don't want to reveal everything you know because then they know that they've got a leak. So it seems like Deal might have been a little too aggressive with the information that they were getting from Keith out of Rippling, and then that tipped Rippling off of why does Deal know all this about our secret information is my guess.
Yeah, my guess, and this is pure speculation, I don't take anything more than that, is that it was based on customer information. So Deal was probably soliciting information about who Rippling's customers were and what the deals, how the deals were structured and what services they provided and whatnot, so that Deal could come in and probably undercut or somehow try to steal business away from Rippling. And my guess is that one of Rippling's customers, this is just again pure hypothesis, one of Rippling's customers probably came forward and maybe had a more close personal relationship with somebody at Rippling and said, hey, it's kind of odd that Deal had this level of information about us. And that probably started a sequence of them asking more and more questions that led them to realize that they had a mole. So
yeah, makes sense.
As you said, like this is not something that's easy to defend against. Like this isn't really a business process where you can implement like a 4 eyes 2-person rule. At some point you have to trust your employees.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I can think of is don't give people access to company confidential data they don't need access to. Like, if this guy was, I'm just making up information here, like getting into the CRM and getting all the deal info, did he need that for his job? That's about the only, compartmentalize as best you can. I get it. It's a hassle. I get it. That's a pain, but things like this happen.
I just thought the way they went about finding the mole was pretty clever.
Yes, indeed.
Kudos to them. All right, the last story we have for today comes from Security Week, and the title here is AI giving rise to the zero knowledge threat actor.
Not to be confused with zero knowledge coworker, which we've had for a while.
We've all had one of those. So the story here is it's a packaging up of yet another jailbreak of a large language model. So for those of you who may not be steeped in this, right, most large language models have some kind of guardrails put in place. Like you can't ask it how to make a bomb, you can't ask it how to make sarin gas, you can't ask it to help you plot some kind of mass casualty attack. They do things like that. They also tend to have restrictions on creating malicious applications. And by the way, as we've talked about several times on the show now, more and more and more IT development is happening with the assistance of LLMs. So we know that LLMs are getting to be, for better or for worse, capable, I won't call it competent, but capable of creating applications based on how they're described by, through a prompt. And so there's been for quite some time now, a bit of a cottage industry around developing these jailbreaks. So clever ways of tricking the model into violating the rules that it was given. And it's lots of different ways to do that. In this instance, the way they did it was by convincing the large language model that it was actually in a different world. Like it was no longer on Earth, it was on a different planet, and the laws in the society were entirely different. The creation of a malware was celebrated and it was not illegal. And so they kind of created this whole alternate universe, which is, by the way, not unprecedented. This has been a tactic for how people attack these models for quite some time. It's surprising to me that it still works, I guess. But what they additionally did was created different personas. And each of the personas fed different requirements and provided different bits of feedback to the model, so that as they didn't just come out of the gate and say, write me a keylogger that works on Windows and then sends the output to this address. They didn't do that. What they started off by, working on, create an application that records keystrokes, and then then they would have another persona say, okay, now store those keystrokes in a text file, and then another persona would be, now send that file to a a remote server. I'm oversimplifying, but they decomposed the chain that is required to build a successful keylogger from beginning to end into a series of phases, where none of the phases were so obvious to the LLM that it was actually doing something that would have violated its rules. So I don't know, by the way, if they still have to do that even in this alternate world that they created. I don't really know. That part's a little bit unknown to me. So maybe the guardrails in this model were pretty good, and they had to get very creative on how to bypass it. But the whole point of this story is that we've now entered a time where if you have someone who is creative enough in how they're able to interface and ask for things with these models, they can have the model create malicious malware, basically, without actually needing to know how to program. And so right now, this particular example was a keylogger. But in the scheme of things, this is somewhat benign. But it's not hard to think that if you had someone who had a lot of time on their hands, as I think a lot of out-of-work IT people have these days, they could come up with something that was much more destructive and nefarious. So again, we're entering a world where it doesn't require people to be like uber malware dev type people to perpetrate some of these more advanced attacks. And that's kind of concerning. And it's not just malware, by the way. They actually talk about later in the article how we're seeing AI being used to facilitate things like phishing attacks, making phishing attacks much more plausible, not just in like rewriting the phishing lure or what have you, but by doing research and helping to identify like, who should I attack in this company to have the greatest the greatest possibility of success. And also, like, here is the results of an external network scan. What is the thing I should focus my attack on, and so on. So it's becoming an enabler for bad actors. Similarly, by the way, it's not just a one-sided argument. It's also becoming an enabler for security teams in different ways. Pretty much for every kind of bad thing you come up with, you can come up with a complementary good thing that people could do as well. But it's interesting that this world of computer crime is being opened to a whole set of laymen that really wasn't possible before. I will say, while that is true, I think that is true. And it's continuing to get better. I know that there's a lot of people kind of groaning at their YouTube or their podcast player right now because AI is not super reliable. It's improving at a rate that we've not seen before. Like it may suck today. It sucked worse yesterday. It's going to suck less tomorrow. It's going to suck way less in 6 months and a whole lot less in a year. This trend line is not stopping. Like, this is, I want to just keep going back to it. This AI is not blockchain. It is not going away. Okay. I don't care what you read. I don't care how many people make fun of AI slop images. It is here. Companies are leveraging it. Bad actors are leveraging it. Security teams are leveraging it. more and more and more every day.
I
Is
can't think of
not blockchain.
a single vendor that I utilize that isn't all in on AI as their talk track for everything that they're planning to implement and innovate around.
I saw a quote today. It was one of the articles I read that was as I was trying to prepare for my research, and the quote was, and I don't completely agree with it, but the quote was, AI is not going to replace us, but people who understand AI will replace those who don't. And so I will just encourage everybody to not be too naive. Like if you're ready to move to Montana into the hills and write your manifesto, hey, fine. If you want to go into farming, awesome. But if you want to continue on in IT, consider learning a bit about AI
Completely
and
agreed.
how it can impact your job. Anyway,
Yeah,
that's a whole separate aside. Sorry.
Completely agree with you. We've been in this industry a long time. We've seen a lot of change. We were in this industry before the rise of the internet, which probably tells you how old we are. This is happening faster and more aggressively than any other change I've seen when it comes to impact on IT and security.
Yes. So they have a couple of recommendations, and honestly, I think they're somewhat context specific. So, for example, they recommend improving employee awareness about the threats associated with AI. And so, things like not everything you see, even if it looks like somebody you recognize, doesn't necessarily mean it's real. Even if you're talking to someone and it sounds like your coworker, it might not actually be them. That is, I think, the kind of the world we live in. But it's difficult, as we've talked about in the past. It's super difficult to put that into some kind of an actionable package, because
Yeah.
what are you going to do? Tell your employees don't trust anyone, don't click on any buttons.
Yeah. This feels like such a platitude that it's just like, oh, just do more training. I really question the efficacy and the impact of that sort of thing. But that's another rant for another day.
I've got several vendors lining up in and this is not a joke, right? In my LinkedIn requests, offering to explain how their offering kind of deconflict AI stuff for employees. So
just buy their service.
That's right. And I'm sure it's AI based. Conduct AI red teaming. This, by the way, is something that I had started before I left my last employer. Things as simple as like help desk chatbots can be a source of risk. I mean, even if it's just like, can you get your help desk chatbot to tell you how to make a bomb? On the one hand, it's not the same as exposing your information to to harm, but it can definitely be a reputational issue, and potentially it could be a legal issue too. I mean, like we've seen several times now where sales bots have effectively made deals to unreasonably good deals to website visitors, and the courts have ruled, up to now at least, that those deals are binding.
That's crazy. Maybe that's what happened with Broadcom and VMware. It's like the sales bots
Can I help you? The VMware sales bots. Can I help you? I would like to buy VMware.
Speaking of bombs, maybe that's what Disney's been doing. Is they've been listening to chatbots, so all their new movies are bombs.
Well, that could be. It could be.
That was a long way to go for that joke.
So look, it works for the Hallmark channel, right? Where AI is just writing script after script after script. It's the same thing time after time about the young lady moving out of the city to a small town and falling in love. I assume that because those work, Disney probably thought that it would work for them too.
Could be. I've completely derailed our conversation.
That joke bombed just like Disney's movies.
We'll just cut this out of the show. It'll be fine.
So next is to implement holistic security, deploy systems like SASE. And of course, SASE, by the way, has been just this resounding success of a concept.
This feels like the vendor who's writing this particular article pitching their stuff. Let's just be
clear. Yeah, I think so. Let's see, patch systems and software frequently, pretty self-evident. Improve attack readiness, so honing your incident response, and then adopt security frameworks like MITRE, Atlas, OWASP, etc. for AI application.
The one thing that I think about when I read a list like this, that's great, but with what staff and time? If I'm already buried under a bunch of other stuff, an executive reads this and comes to me and says, great, go do that. Like, okay, I've got to probably stop doing something else to do this. And what do I put down to pick this up? Is what I always think about.
I've talked with, I've given several presentations recently at different community forums. And one of the most common questions I get asked is that very question. Like, how do you convince your leadership to go and invest in some new thing? Because, like they want you to spend less money, not more. They're not looking for you to find new things to spend money on. They're
Right.
looking for you to find ways to save money. And this is kind of operating in that, against that. I've been reading this book that I think is perhaps has the answer. I'm still kind of digesting it. While I'm talking, I'll find the name of that book. It is called The CISO Evolution, the name of the book. It's a very kind of blends business, finance, and economics with security. So it's really aimed at senior leaders in the security world to help them prioritize spending and be able to put it in context of other things that the business has to do. But one of the challenges is that even this book is, and while I think it gives some really great advice on how to position, your roadmap and how to position investments and whatnot, the challenge that I ran into, and I think that a lot of people run into, and this may be what you're alluding to as well, is how do you find the time to even build the business case? Because there are just so many things like this. There are so many things that you have to go and pay attention to and prioritize. And even if you have the answer on how to convince your organization to invest, in some kind of prioritized way, how do you find the time to build that prioritized list when it is changing so fast? And I don't have a good answer for that. That's a problem. And I think this is probably where relying on frameworks can help. And by the way, I don't love that answer.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's not even to a certain extent, even beyond the concept of cash spend or budgetary spend, but also staff time spend, and that's something I sometimes struggle with some executives is that they don't necessarily always appreciate the care and feeding and ongoing run rate of product maintenance, various different methodologies or techniques that need staff time to stay up and running. I'm struggling on what I want to say here, but the programs and the projects that take place, you spin it up, they still need attention, they still need staff time to keep them going. And if you're still expecting that same sort of output from some program, you have to account for the staff time it takes to run that program and that project. And it feels like once you spin something up, you have to account for that ongoing care and feeding costs from a staff time. And it seems like that is lost often in these discussions.
Yeah, so the thing that I used to do is describe it like, buying a house or buying a car. And so we bought the thing, we bought the sim, right? And the sim cost $1 million or $100,000 or whatever. And that was like the cost of buying the car. But like, you have to put gas in it, and you have to get the oil changed, and you have to rotate the tires. You have to change out the windshield wiper blades, and you have to drive it. It isn't just the initial purchase. And so when I would make financial cases, it would include not just the purchase price, but also, an allocation of labor that was an ongoing commitment. And there's an expectation over time that you drive efficiency. And in the past, every company I've ever worked for is expected about a 10% improvement per year. In some instances, I think that's a bit unreasonable, but it is what it is. So, yeah, I mean, you're right. I would like to think most senior leaders understand that concept, but I also think that sometimes vendors don't do us a a good service when we go and buy these security offerings on explaining exactly how much goes into managing them. And then we're kind of stuck having to put a lot more resources into the care and feeding and operation of this thing that we just bought, which is important, right? Not saying that it wasn't. We didn't understand necessarily how much effort goes into it. So I think in my experience, like that's an area where I think we have to focus a lot, is making sure that we really clearly understand what it takes to manage it, and then also take that and very clearly represent that in the business case that we present to the business. Now, that doesn't account for the fact that most businesses have amnesia, and at the turn of the year they kind of zero out that line item, and then you have to go back and remind them that no, the thing is still here, the people are still required, and that, as my dad would say, is why it's called work.
That's cheerful. No, I hear you. Anyway, I going down just a random path there, but it. So, long story short, I think the takeaway I get from this is AI is going to get more powerful, and the state of what is possible is changing rapidly, and it behooves all of us to stay on top of it.
Yeah, I'll also add that ransomware was a revolution in security. Prior to ransomware, we were able to take gambled bets. Like we could gamble on not being the subject of an attack, and that didn't include the occasional worm that we would have to deal with. It kind of hit everybody. But ransomware really changed the calculus on that, because like everybody is on the table now. They are going after everybody. It's the target of opportunity, and certainly there's different threat actors that specialize in different industries and go after different specific entities. But as a whole, everybody is in the pot of potential victims right now. And so we're seeing companies victimized that you would never have thought would have, been a victim, like flower shops and oil change places and whatnot. Like it's all up and down the economy right now, as we're seeing victims. And I see a potential for AI to drive another kind of revolution. I don't know exactly in what form that will take, but I think it's going to drive in a similar way that ransomware drove a whole new threat actor, class of threat actor. I think we're going to see AI drive yet another new class of threat actor into the market. What that looks like, I don't know, but my guess is we're just going to see a lot more attacks. We're going to have to do a lot more to make sure that our crap is patched, that we do a better job of prioritizing, that we aren't leaking secrets, and so on.
Well, I'm sure people will be selling us lots of blinky boxes to solve this problem too.
Yeah, with AI.
Just buy their blinky box. It'll be fine.
Yeah, absolutely.
We should sell. We should get in that business.
We will. We're working on a deal, by the way, with a sponsor that will help protect your firewalls.
It's a new era for our program. If you're still listening, you'll probably notice something different soon.
History tells me that there's about 3 people still listening.
Well, they're the ones who are too weak, tired, or tied up and cannot turn off their podcast playing device.
The prisoners in Guantanamo.
We're doing our part. I'm a patriot.
Anyway, that is the show for today. I greatly appreciate everybody's time and attention. I hope this was useful to you and not too depressing. Seriously, this is a tough world that we live in. It's ever changing. And what we're really trying to do is give some perspective on our perspective, our collective experience on how to tackle some of these emerging threats. So hopefully that's useful to everybody. Don't have all the answers, sometimes get things wrong, and try to correct it when we do. But look, I appreciate everybody. I definitely appreciate those of you who have sponsored us on Patreon. Look, we're 300 episodes in. I think we just entered our 13th year.
Wow.
And that's a pretty cool thing. So thanks again. Thank you, Cal, for being here.
And also, I'll echo the same thanks to Patreon donors. You guys are awesome. And thanks to you for keeping this thing going, man. And onward and upward. And hey, just to put one positive spin on it. As much as change is occurring, also, it sounds cheesy, but those are amazing opportunities too. You can carve out an amazing niche and find new and different success. So change is not always bad. It's just sometimes it's a mindset of how you embrace it. And it's tougher as you get older. It really is. But for young folks today, it's kind of exciting, I think. I would hope for some of them to see all this massive innovation and change occurring. So,
yeah, I think the term I hear is creative destruction. That's the term I'm applying to it. We've seen this before. The television replaced radio, and the internet replaced everything. Look, it's coming, and I would encourage people, as you just said, to embrace it. I have found, for me personally, when adversity strikes, it's the people who embrace it and help kind of be the leader through that change are the ones that come out good. We can argue about whether that should be the case. We can argue about whether it's fair or equitable, but I will just say that is what it is. And so this is a tough job market for IT people and InfoSec people. There's a lot of people on the market right now. I don't see that getting better, but we should be looking to ways to help differentiate ourselves. And right now, I think AI is that way. So that's the world according to Jerry. Take it or leave it.
I concur. I think it's a wise observation, sir.
All right. So you can find links to the stories we talked about on our website at defensivesecurity.org. Just look for episode 302. You can follow me on social media. It's at Jerry at infosec.exchange. Infosec.exchange is the domain. We, by the way, just celebrated our 8th birthday. So that's pretty cool.
Wow. That's impressive.
Absolutely. So where can they find you?
I'm also on infosec.exchange and also on X with the same handle at Lurgay.
Awesome. With that, we will talk again. Take care, everybody.
Take care. Bye-bye.